Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind, and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into something deeply human, something you've been carrying with you all your life, often without realizing it, the presence of the past. We'll be asking a curious question together. Are you in fact living in your past right now? But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into memory, time, and the subtle ways yesterday slips into today. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Have you ever felt that a moment you're living right now is not entirely new, as if a faint echo from long ago is quietly replaying in the background? It might be the way a certain smell stops you in your tracks, the aroma of bread rising in an oven, pulling you back to a childhood kitchen you hadn't thought about in years. Or perhaps it's the sound of a song on the radio, one that you used to listen to with a friend who has long since drifted from your life, and suddenly the emotions from that time well up as if no time has passed at all. These are the little ghosts of experiences past, visiting us in the present, shaping how we feel, what we choose, and even who we believe ourselves to be. The human brain has a quiet talent for turning life into story. Each day's events are not stored away like perfectly preserved photographs, but more like chapters of a book written in pencil. Our hippocampus, the part of the brain most responsible for cataloguing experience, is like a tireless librarian, deciding where each memory should sit on the shelf. But here is the trick. Each time you revisit a memory, you do not simply retrieve it, you rewrite it. The act of remembering is more like painting again from memory rather than watching a recording. A little detail is smudged here, another is brightened there. The smell in the air when it happened, the way you feel now, even the tone of the present moment, all of these colour the memory again before it is returned to the shelf. That is why your recollection of a childhood summer may feel warm and golden, even if the reality was mixed with mosquito bites and boredom. The past you carry into today is not a fixed archive. It is a living, shifting impression that comes back to life each time you call upon it. And so, when you say you are living in the present, part of you is still reliving yesterday, filtered through the brain's gentle edits. Think of a time when someone once gave you a compliment. Perhaps they admired your voice or praised your kindness, or told you that you were better at something than you had ever given yourself credit for. Even if years have passed, those words can still guide your steps, encouraging you to speak up, to volunteer, to take a risk. Now, consider the opposite. A single insult or rejection that lingers far longer than you want it to. You may find yourself hesitating today, not because of the situation in front of you, but because of the old voice still echoing. The past is never really gone. It is folded into the very fabric of our choices in the now. Scientists sometimes speak of this ability as mental time travel. It is one of the things that makes us uniquely human. We can slip back into past experiences and re-inhabit them with surprising vividness. We can also project forward into imagined futures using the very same brain networks. When you recall what you had for breakfast yesterday, or imagine what you will do tomorrow morning, you are activating overlapping regions of the brain. It is as if your mind carries a portable stage on which scenes of the past can be replayed and futures can be rehearsed, all while the body sits quietly in the present. And yet, this gift is not without its burdens. Because the past is so easily reanimated, it often whispers into moments that would otherwise be fresh. You meet a new colleague, but you notice they remind you of someone who once hurt you, and you react more cautiously than you otherwise might. You begin a new project, but an earlier failure clouds your confidence before you even start. The present is constantly being tinted by these old pigments, whether you want them or not. There is comfort in this too. Imagine the way muscle memory lets you ride a bicycle after years of neglect, or how the recipe you learned from a grandparent comes back almost effortlessly when you return to the kitchen. Here, the ghosts of the past are guides, walking beside you, saving you from relearning the basics each time. Life would be exhausting if the present had no access to what came before. Every conversation, every step on a staircase, every letter on a keyboard would have to be learned again and again. The fact that we carry our past within us makes the present livable. And yet, it can be haunting. If you've ever lain awake at night replaying something you said years ago, only to cringe and wish you could change it, you know how stubborn these visitors from the past can be. They do not care if you've grown since then, or if the people involved have long forgotten. The memory shows up at the door, uninvited but insistent, and so you lie there, reliving a moment that is gone, yet alive again in your nervous system. The truth is that none of us live in the present in a pure sense. Every glance, every word, every decision is touched by the fingerprints of what came before. Sometimes those fingerprints are helpful, reminding you of joy and lessons well learned. Other times they smudge the glass, making it hard to see what is actually in front of you. As we go deeper into this journey tonight, we'll gently explore how these echoes shape us, how they sometimes trap us, and how, with a bit of mindful awareness, we can learn to live with the ghosts instead of being ruled by them. So, as you settle further into your pillow or your chair, perhaps noticing the rhythm of your own breath, let yourself imagine that librarian inside your mind, carefully filing, retrieving and rewriting the stories that make you who you are. It has been working since your earliest days, and it will keep working long after tonight. For now, you can simply notice the past is not back there on some distant shelf. It is right here, woven into this very moment. Think for a moment about how you might picture memory. Many people imagine it like a video recording, a neat archive of everything you have seen, heard or felt, waiting to be played back at will. But in truth, memory is far more slippery and creative. It is not a film reel stored away in perfect fidelity, but a painting recreated each time you recall it, influenced by the light of the present moment and the brushstrokes of your current emotions. Scientists who study memory sometimes describe it as reconstruction. Each time you revisit an event, you're not pulling it down unchanged from the shelf. Instead, you're repainting it, adding details you never noticed, softening some edges, sharpening others, and even misplacing a few things entirely. The result can feel so convincing that you would swear it happened exactly that way. But in reality, the memory has been edited. Imagine sitting at a desk with a stack of old photographs. Each time you pick one up, you trace over it with coloured pencils. Maybe the sky looks a little bluer because today you're in a good mood. Maybe the shadows look darker because you're remembering on a sad evening. When you put the picture back, the new marks stay. The next time you revisit it, you are no longer looking at the original, but at the version you altered before. This is why siblings often remember the same family vacation differently, each convinced their account is the accurate one. One recalls the joy of swimming at the beach, the sun glinting on the waves. Another insists that the trip was overshadowed by the long car ride and the endless mosquito bites. Both are telling the truth as they experienced it. Both are also telling a story that has been reshaped with each retelling. The philosopher and psychologist William James once wrote that the stream of consciousness is never still, always flowing. Memory is part of that current. It shifts and bends as it moves, carrying along traces of yesterday into today. And so, when you say you are living in the past, you're not living in the past exactly as it was, but in a version of it that your mind has woven together, part history, part imagination, part present perspective. This is not a flaw, it is a feature. If memory were only an exact recording, it would be less useful for guiding your life. Imagine if every recollection of touching a hot stove came back as a sterile replay with no feeling attached. It would be less persuasive than the memory that carries the echo of pain, reminding you not to repeat the mistake. Our memories are biased, coloured, and sometimes distorted precisely because that makes them more adaptive. They nudge us away from danger, toward connection, toward survival, but this gift can also mislead. Think of a moment when you remembered a conversation with a friend and later discovered that some of the words you were sure they had spoken were never said at all. Your brain had filled in the gaps with what seemed likely, creating a memory that felt authentic but was partly invention. The neuroscientist Daniel Schachter calls this one of the sins of memory, suggestibility. The past is not just replayed, it is reauthored. And yet, isn't there a strange comfort in knowing that you are the author? Each memory is a story that you continue to tell and revise. If you have ever taken an embarrassing moment and retold it so many times that it becomes a funny anecdote, you have participated in this process. What was once humiliation is now comedy, softened by retelling. Your mind has reshaped the past to make it livable. The hippocampus, that small seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain, is central to this ability. It helps stitch together the elements of experience, sights, sounds, emotions, into a coherent whole. Without it, events scatter like loose beads, never forming a necklace. People with damage to the hippocampus often cannot form new episodic memories, leaving them stranded in an eternal present. They cannot revisit yesterday, nor can they imagine tomorrow. Their lives demonstrate by absence what we so easily overlook, the way our sense of self is built on the ongoing act of remembering and re-experiencing. When you close your eyes and recall your first day at school, or the taste of your grandmother's cooking, or the moment you held someone's hand for the first time, you're not simply looking at a dusty archive, you're reliving. The same brain regions that lit up then are stirring again now, giving the experience texture and feeling. That is why a song can make you cry, not because the notes themselves are sad, but because they unlock a moment that your body believes it is inhabiting once more. There is a reason nostalgia can feel so powerful. The word itself means the pain of returning home. To be nostalgic is not just to remember, but to experience the sweetness and ache of a place you cannot actually return to. And yet, in a sense, you do return because your brain allows you to walk again through those corridors of time, however reconstructed they may be. Perhaps you have had the experience of looking through an old diary or photo album and realizing that the person who wrote those words or posed for that picture feels both entirely you and somehow distant. That is the paradox of memory. It connects us to the past while also reminding us that we are no longer the same. In re-experiencing what came before, you glimpse how much you have changed. Tonight, as you lie listening, perhaps you can let yourself drift into one gentle memory. Maybe of a morning when sunlight fell across your bed just right, or of a meal shared with someone you loved. Notice how, even now, recalling it brings a faint warmth, a sense of being there. That is the mind's quiet magic, bringing ghosts of experience into the present moment. But memory's power is double-edged. The same process that lets joy resurface can also let regrets rise uninvited, looping over and over. In the next part of our journey, we will wander into these loops, asking what happens when the past does not just visit the present, but tries to take up permanent residence. Everyday life is full of small hauntings, not the kind with rattling chains or flickering lights, but the quiet, invisible visitations of memory. They appear when you least expect them. Walking down a street and catching sight of someone's stride that reminds you of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, or opening a cupboard and being struck by the smell of cinnamon that suddenly places you back in a long-forgotten holiday kitchen. These moments are proof that the past is never entirely past. It lingers like a whisper in the corner of the room. Psychologists sometimes call this involuntary memory. You did not ask for it, and yet it arrived, slipping into the present as if it had been waiting patiently for an invitation. The French writer Marcel Proust made this famous when he described how a simple Madeleine cake dipped in tea brought back an ocean of childhood recollections. He was not searching for those memories. They rose up on their own, summoned by taste and scent. Most of us experience something similar, though perhaps with less literary flair. A whiff of perfume, the feel of a wool sweater, or the particular creak of an old floorboard. All of these can open doors to times we thought were locked behind us. But not all hauntings are sweet. Sometimes they carry a sting. A phrase you once spoke in embarrassment resurfaces just as you are trying to fall asleep. A mistake from long ago intrudes while you're preparing for something important, as if your brain has decided to remind you of every past failure at the least helpful moment. These mental intrusions can feel unfair, even cruel, yet they are part of the same system that preserves joyful recollections. The mind does not discriminate. It holds the whole catalogue: joys and sorrows, pride and shame, triumphs and regrets. Why does it do this? From a survival perspective, it makes sense. Painful memories were meant to guide us, to keep us from repeating mistakes. If you once touched a nettle, your body remembers the sting to help you avoid it again. The same principle applies, at least in part, to social pain. If you once faced ridicule in a group, your brain keeps that memory alive as a warning signal. The trouble is that these signals are not always accurate. The context changes, people change, you change. But the brain sometimes replays the past as if nothing has moved forward. This is why déjà vu can feel unsettling. It is the uncanny sensation of reliving something that you cannot quite place. Scientists still debate exactly why this happens, but one idea is that the brain's memory circuits misfire slightly, giving you the eerie impression that the present has already been stored as past. It is like tripping over a fold in time, where the now feels like a rerun. Some researchers suggest it may be the overlap of dream residue, fragments of nightly rehearsal sneaking into waking life. You meet someone new, but their gestures echo a figure from your dreams, and suddenly, the moment feels strangely familiar. Think of your mind as a room with very thin walls. On the other side are the neighbours, your yesterdays. Most of the time, the walls muffle their voices, but occasionally a sound slips through, faint but distinct. That is how memories intrude. They are not deliberately summoned. They simply seep across the thin boundary between then and now. And sometimes this is delightful. Consider nostalgia. A song from your teenage years plays, and you find yourself smiling, perhaps even mouthing the lyrics without realizing. The rhythm carries you back to a time when everything felt more intense, more immediate. Nostalgia is like being wrapped in a blanket woven from old threads, part comfort, part ache, because you cannot truly return. Yet for a moment the past is alive again, and it can lift the spirit, reminding you of who you were and how far you have come. Other times the haunting is less pleasant. You might be washing dishes when a memory of an awkward conversation from 5 years ago surfaces, vivid and insistent. You shake your head, trying to dismiss it, but the body reacts anyway, shoulders tightening, stomach clenching, as if it were happening again. The past has borrowed the nervous system of the present. This too is part of the brain's design. When a memory is re-experienced, it is not merely visual. It awakens the same patterns of bodily response, the same echoes of emotion. It can be comforting to realize that everyone experiences these intrusions. You're not alone in lying awake replaying a moment no one else even remembers. The brain is simply doing what it has always done, retrieving and reshaping, offering reminders, warnings, comforts, and sometimes inconveniences. The ghosts are part of the architecture of being human. Of course, the challenge comes when the past intrudes so often, or with such weight, that it overshadows the present. Then the hauntings feel less like gentle whispers and more like heavy hands. In those moments, the question becomes not just whether you are living in your past, but whether the past is living through you. But before we explore those darker corridors, let's pause here. For now, notice the lighter side of these hauntings. Remember a time when a smell, a song, or a familiar street corner surprised you with a memory that made you smile. These are reminders that the past is not only a burden, but also a companion. It is the echo of laughter at a dinner table, the warmth of a hand once held, the first spark of joy in discovering something new. Even when it startles you, the past is also offering gifts. As we drift into the next part of our journey, we'll turn more directly toward those times when the past becomes a weight, when the echoes repeat so loudly that they drown out the present moment, when yesterday refuses to stay yesterday. That is where we'll wander next, the prison of unprocessed memories and the subtle ways they can keep us from stepping forward. If you try to hold on to the present moment to capture it as if it were a coin in your hand, you may notice something curious. By the time you've said, "This is now," the moment has already slipped into memory. The present is like a soap bubble, shimmering and whole for an instant, only to pop into the past before you can touch it. You are always one step behind, living in echoes of a moment that has just become yesterday. Philosophers have long puzzled over this. St. Augustine, writing more than 1500 years ago, asked, "What is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I try to explain it, I do not." He wondered how the present could exist at all, when it is constantly vanishing into the past and reaching into the future. The paradox is that what we call now is not a stable point, but a river of instants flowing endlessly onward. Neuroscience offers its own soft explanation. Your brain doesn't perceive the world in absolute real time. Instead, it gathers information in small windows, fractions of a second at a time, and then stitches them together into a continuous stream. Think of it like a movie reel. Each frame is static, but when played quickly in succession, the illusion of motion appears. Consciousness works in a similar way, blending snapshots into what feels like a seamless now. This means the present you experience is not the exact present of physics. It is a stitched-together construct delayed by a heartbeat, smoothed out by your mind so that you don't notice the gaps. You live in what some researchers call the extended present, a brief span that gathers the last few seconds, blends them with the immediate perception, and prepares for the next moment. Consider music. When you hear a melody, you do not experience each note in isolation. Your mind holds on to the fading echo of the note just played, combines it with the sound of the current one and anticipates the next. Without this blending, music would not be music at all. It would be disconnected beeps, incomprehensible. The same is true of life. Without the overlap of past and present, the world would be a blur of meaningless fragments. This overlap is why you can walk across a room without stumbling. Each step is guided not only by the placement of your foot right now, but by the memory of where it was a moment ago and the anticipation of where it needs to land next. The so-called present is actually a braid woven from threads of memory and expectation. Imagine yourself at a window, watching raindrops fall. One drop slides down the glass, leaving a trail behind it. Another follows, and another. The present moment is not just the bead of water you see right now. It is the line it leaves behind, and the one you expect will follow. That is how your consciousness flows, always entwining what just was with what is about to be. And yet, there is something unsettling about realizing that the present is never quite pure. It means that when we say, live in the now, we're asking for something our brains are not fully designed to do. We're always lagging a little, replaying the immediate past while predicting the near future. Pure presence, like pure silence, may be more of an ideal than an everyday reality, but perhaps that is not a failing. perhaps it is the mind's quiet grace. Imagine trying to live in a single mathematical instant stripped of context. You would lose the thread of conversation, the shape of movement, the sense of continuity that makes life intelligible. By stretching the now ever so slightly, your mind makes meaning possible. Still, this stretch can create illusions. You may feel as though you're responding in the present when, in truth, you're reacting from a memory that is seconds, years, or even decades old. You may feel as though you're making a fresh decision when your brain is drawing heavily on stored experiences and expectations. In this way, the present is like a fabric stitched with threads of every age you have ever been. Try noticing this the next time you sip a cup of tea or coffee. The warmth on your tongue is real and current, but your judgment of whether you enjoy it is filtered through every other cup you've ever had. The scent rising from the mug carries with it the memory of other mornings, other kitchens, perhaps even the people who once sat across from you. In that instant, you're not only tasting the present, you are tasting the past, seasoned by expectation of the next sip. Even when you look at the night sky, the illusion of the present is revealed. The starlight that reaches your eyes left its source years, centuries, or even millennia ago. You're always looking into history, even as it feels immediate. The universe itself insists that the now is never only now. So when you wonder whether you are living in your past, remember that to some degree you always are. Your brain and the cosmos alike weave the present out of what has already happened. What you call now is not a point on a timeline, but a window filled with echoes. This realization need not be unsettling. Instead, it can be oddly comforting. If the present is already a blend of past and future, then you do not need to strive for a perfect, unattainable instant. You're already living in the flow, where memory, perception, and anticipation meet. And that flow, while fleeting, is also continuous, like the soft, ceaseless rhythm of waves arriving on a shore. In the sessions ahead, we will explore how this tug-of-war between anticipation and reflection makes pure presence elusive, and how even our newest experiences are always filtered through what has come before. But for now, you might close your eyes and notice your own extended present, the hum of the room around you, the trace of a thought from moments ago, the expectation of the next sentence. This is your now, a shimmering braid of echoes and inklings, vanishing and reforming with every breath. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to stay purely in the present, even when you tell yourself, I will focus only on this moment? The mind has its own ideas. 1 second you're watching the steam curl from your teacup, the next you're remembering a conversation from yesterday, and then suddenly you're thinking about the errands you need to run tomorrow. It's as though the mind is a pendulum, always swinging between what has just happened and what is yet to come, rarely pausing in the middle. This tendency is not a flaw, it is part of how the brain works. The same networks that allow you to recall a memory also allow you to imagine a future. The hippocampus, along with other regions like the prefrontal cortex, does double duty. It pulls you back into yesterday's classroom, and it lets you picture tomorrow's meeting. It's as though the brain has one stage, and both memory and imagination are actors waiting for their turn under the spotlight. The curtain never falls completely. One exits, the other enters, and the play continues. Think of how often your day is coloured by anticipation. You wait for a train, already imagining where it will take you. You prepare for a conversation, rehearsing in your head what you might say. You lie in bed, picturing tomorrow's tasks stacked up like books waiting to be read. These are all moments where the present itself is overshadowed by what comes next. At the same time, reflection pulls from the other direction. A moment ago, someone's words may still be echoing in your mind, and you find yourself rehearsing what you could have said differently. You open the fridge, see the leftovers, and recall the dinner conversation that accompanied them. A song on the radio makes you smile because it links you to a summer long past. In each case, the present is filtered through memory's soft lens. The psychologist Endel Tulving once described this as mental time travel. He noted that the same ability that lets us replay the past also lets us pre-play the future. It is a gift unique to humans in its richness, and yet it comes with a cost. Because of it, the pure present is almost impossible to grasp. You're always, in some sense, either a historian of your own life or a prophet of your next moment. Consider the simple act of walking down the street. With each step, your body remembers the rhythm of walking from every time you've done it before. At the same time, your brain anticipates where to place the next foot, keeping you balanced. Even such a basic act depends on reflection and anticipation working together. Without them, the present would crumble. And yet, when applied to more emotional experiences, this pendulum can feel heavy. Reflection can become rumination, looping the past endlessly. Anticipation can become anxiety, rehearsing disasters that may never come. Together they tug at the mind, stretching the present so thin it almost disappears. You might recognize this when trying to sleep. You lie in the dark hoping for rest, but the mind is busy. It replays the day's conversations, then leaps forward to tomorrow's challenges. Backward, forward, backward, forward. Like a restless swing in the night. The body is still, but the mind is in motion, darting between ghosts of yesterday and shadows of tomorrow. And yet, there is a kind of beauty in this motion. Reflection is what allows you to learn. If you touch a hot pan once, memory ensures you don't do it again. If you speak too harshly to a friend, the echo of regret helps guide you toward kinder words next time. Anticipation, meanwhile, allows you to prepare. Without imagining the future, you would walk into each day blind, with no plans, no goals, no hope. It helps to see the pendulum not as a thief of the present, but as part of its design. The present moment, as we experience it, is not a static island. It is more like a bridge suspended between two shores. One side is memory, the other is possibility. Without both, the bridge would collapse. Imagine standing on that bridge. Behind you, the landscape of your past is visible. Mountains of childhood, rivers of friendships, valleys of mistakes. Ahead of you, the misty outline of the future rises, not yet clear, but already taking shape. You are here, on the bridge itself, supported by both directions at once. The pendulum swings, but it does not break the bridge. It keeps it balanced. This is why people often find themselves lost in thought during simple tasks like washing dishes or folding laundry. The hands work in the present, but the mind strolls backward or forward, revisiting conversations, anticipating outcomes. It may feel like distraction, but it is also a kind of quiet rehearsal, weaving past lessons with future intentions. The challenge is not to silence reflection or anticipation. That would be impossible and perhaps undesirable. The challenge is to notice when the swing becomes too strong, when you're pulled so far back into yesterday or so far ahead into tomorrow that the bridge beneath your feet begins to vanish. In those moments, it can help to pause and find a small anchor. The sound of the dishwater running, the feel of the fabric between your fingers, the warmth of the pillow beneath your head. These are reminders that you are still here, even while the pendulum swings. So perhaps the next time you feel your mind racing between what was and what might be, you can imagine yourself standing calmly on that bridge. Let the past ripple behind you, let the future shimmer ahead, but notice the boards beneath your feet. They are the present. Fleeting, yes, fragile perhaps, but also real right now, holding you steady. And as we continue, we'll see how even brand new experiences are never really pure. They arrive already dressed in the clothing of the past, filtered through what you have known before. Every new now is coloured by the echoes of what came before it. Picture yourself stepping into a cafe you've never visited before. The lights are soft, the chairs arranged at just the right distance for quiet conversation, and the air carries the faint scent of roasted beans. For a moment it feels new, fresh, untouched by anything you've known before. And yet, as soon as you take your first sip, your brain is already comparing it to the 100 cups of coffee you've had in other places. The flavour is measured against the one you enjoyed last week, or perhaps against that unforgettable cappuccino on a trip years ago. The moment is not pure. It is filtered through layers of memory, like light passing through stained glass. This is how the mind works. Every present experience is evaluated, categorized, and made meaningful by being compared with what has come before. Psychologists call these mental frameworks schemas. They are like templates built from past encounters, shaping how we interpret the new. Without them, life would be overwhelming, a chaos of raw data with no context. With them, we can move through the world efficiently, recognizing a chair as something to sit on, a red light as something to stop at, a smile as something that might signal friendship. But these filters also mean that nothing is ever truly untouched. Even a completely new encounter arrives already dressed in the clothing of the past. Meeting someone for the first time, you might notice that their mannerisms remind you of a teacher, a sibling, or even a character from a film. Before they've spoken more than a few words, you have already begun shaping your expectations of them, guided by echoes of other people you have known. This filtering is not malicious, it is adaptive. Imagine if, every time you encountered a dog, you had to relearn from scratch whether it was friendly or dangerous. Your past experiences with dogs inform your response. A wagging tail and soft eyes trigger comfort if your history is positive, or unease if it is not. The present dog is met through the lens of past dogs. The present cafe through the lens of past cafes. The present kiss through the lens of past love. There is beauty in this. It means that life accumulates depth. A song you hear today is not just notes on the air, it is a chorus layered with every time you have heard it before. The taste of soup is seasoned not only with herbs and salt, but with memories of who once sat across the table sharing it with you. A sunset is coloured by the sunsets you watched as a child, when the sky felt impossibly large and full of promises you could not yet name. And yet, the same mechanism can also weigh heavily. If your filters are filled with painful memories, they can distort the present. A new relationship may feel threatening because an old one ended in betrayal. A fresh opportunity may feel doomed because a past attempt failed. It is as if the stained glass is darkened and every new beam of light is tinted by its shadows. Think of walking into a room with a cracked mirror. No matter how beautiful the scene, the reflection will always be distorted by the fracture. In much the same way, the filters of past experiences bend the light of the present. Sometimes they make it warmer, brighter, easier to see. Sometimes they fracture it into something more complicated, less true. This is why people can experience the same event in such different ways. Two friends may go to the same concert. One is transported, joyfully swept away because the music reminds them of good times. The other feels restless, unsettled, because the same notes echo a period of loss. The present is not one thing, it is many, refracted through the prisms of memory. But without this filtering, there would be no story, no continuity. Imagine tasting coffee without any sense of whether you had ever liked or disliked it before. Each sip would be meaningless, unanchored. The brain's reliance on the past gives the present coherence. It stitches moments into narrative and narrative into identity. At the same time, it can be illuminating to notice when the filter is at work. The next time you meet someone and instantly like or dislike them, pause and ask yourself, who do they remind me of? What memory is colouring this impression? The awareness itself can soften the distortion, letting you see more clearly. Children often remind us of what it is like to experience things without such heavy filtering. Watch a toddler encounter rain for the first time. They tilt their face upward, eyes wide, reaching for the drops as if it were magic. No comparison is made to yesterday's rain or last week's weather report. It is just water falling, astonishing and new. With age, our filters grow thicker. We categorize: drizzle, downpour, storm. Rarely do we simply marvel at water from the sky. Still, those childlike moments are not gone forever. They can be reclaimed in flashes, when you smell fresh bread and it feels miraculous, or when you hear a bird call and are struck by its strangeness rather than labeling it automatically. These are moments when the filter thins and the raw present shines through. They remind us that even though the past shapes our perceptions, we can still touch the wonder of now. So, as you rest here tonight, perhaps you can bring to mind something simple, like the feel of your blanket against your skin, or the sound of your own breath. Notice how your brain instantly tries to compare it. This blanket to the one you had last winter, this sound to the breaths of yesterday. That is natural. But then, for just a second, let the comparison fade. Let yourself notice the softness as softness, the breath as breath. For that small span of time, you may glimpse what it feels like to experience the present before it is draped in the cloth of memory. And when those comparisons inevitably return, as they always do, remember, the filters are not enemies. They are part of the gift of being human. They connect today to yesterday, weaving your life into a continuous thread. Without them, there would be no story, no self. The art is not in erasing them, but in seeing them clearly, and choosing when to look through the glass and when to look beyond it. Have you ever walked into a room for the first time and felt certain you'd been there before? The furniture looks familiar. The angle of light through the window feels rehearsed. Even the way someone laughs sounds strangely recognizable. Yet you know, logically, that this is your first encounter. That uncanny sensation is what we call déjà vu, literally already seen. It is one of the clearest examples of how the past seeps into the present, even when the present should be brand new. Déjà vu is a trick of the mind's filing system. Scientists believe it happens when the brain's recognition circuits spark slightly out of sync. One part of your mind is busy taking in the new scene, while another mistakenly tags it as something retrieved from memory. It is as if two notes were struck at once, one of novelty, one of familiarity, creating a chord that doesn't quite resolve. The result is the eerie feeling of living a rerun. Another possibility, which feels just as poetic, is that fragments of dreams sometimes spill into waking life. Every night your brain stages rehearsals. It takes bits of experience, images, emotions, and arranges them into strange theatre. A classroom mixed with a forest, a stranger wearing your friend's face, a city that folds into itself like paper. These dreams often evaporate when you wake, but some fragments linger, tucked away in corners of memory. Later, when something in the waking world resembles one of those fragments, it feels hauntingly familiar. It is not the present you have lived before. It is the dream that brushed against it. Think of it like ink bleeding through thin pages of a notebook. You're reading the present page, but the shadow of the one beneath it shows through faintly. Dreams, in this metaphor, are the hidden page. Sometimes, in just the right light, you see both at once. This is not just fanciful. Neuroscientists studying memory have found that the same structures in the brain are active both when recalling the past and when imagining something unreal. The hippocampus, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, they do not always distinguish sharply between memory and imagination. To the brain, re-experiencing and pre-experiencing are variations of the same play. This is why a dream can feel so real, and why a new moment can feel like déjà vu. Both are woven from the same threads of memory and anticipation. You might remember waking one morning with a song in your head, one you don't recall, hearing the day before. All day it plays quietly in the background, and then in the evening you finally hear it on the radio. The present feels rehearsed, but it is really your brain blending the echo of dream with the sound of now. A rehearsal stitched itself into the performance. There is a quiet beauty in this overlap. It reminds us that the boundaries between past, present, and imagined are more porous than we like to think. We live not in a sequence of isolated instants, but in a tapestry where memory, dream, and perception overlap. At times, this overlap can be comforting. You might dream of someone you miss, and when you wake, the memory of that dream softens the day with a lingering warmth. At other times, it can be unsettling, as though the mind is playing tricks, making you feel lost in a loop of half-remembered places. But either way, it is proof that the present is never just itself. It carries echoes and foreshadows, ghosts and previews. Poets and storytellers have always been drawn to this. In myths across cultures, dreams are seen as messages from beyond, as rehearsals for destiny, as glimpses of the future. Modern science is less mystical, but in some ways no less wondrous. Even if dreams are just the brain's way of reorganizing information, they still shape the present. They give you feelings and images that color your waking day, whether or not you remember the dream itself. Consider the times you wake up unsettled, with a faint heaviness you can't quite place. You may not recall the dream, but your mood is already tinted. Or the times you wake laughing, the echo of something joyful still warming your chest. These are dream residues, reminders that the mind is always weaving past and present together, even while you sleep. When you add this to déjà vu, the picture becomes clear. The present moment is not a clean slate. It is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over older texts, where the faded ink of what was once there still shows through. You live on the latest layer, but the older words and images remain, ghost-like beneath the surface. And so, the next time you feel a flicker of familiarity in a brand new moment, rather than brushing it off, you might pause and smile. You're witnessing the overlap of timelines, the whisper of memory and dream brushing against the now. You are living proof that time is not a series of clean pages, but a book where every page bears the faint impression of the last. As we move forward, we'll turn to the weightier side of this truth. What happens when these echoes grow too loud, when the past becomes less a whisper and more a prison cell? But for now, you might allow yourself to notice the softer hauntings, the déjà vu, the dream fragments, the songs and scents that make the present shimmer with a sense of having been here before. These are not errors. They are part of what makes life feel storied, continuous, richly human. There are memories that pass by, like soft clouds, pleasant, light, gone in a moment. And then there are memories that seem to circle endlessly, looping like a song you did not choose, one you cannot turn off. These are the moments of unresolved trauma and regret, the experiences that did not finish when they ended. Instead, they remain lodged in the mind, replaying themselves whenever the smallest cue sets them off. Perhaps you have had this happen. You're about to take on something new, maybe speaking in front of a group, applying for a job, or even reaching out to someone you care about. But just as you begin, your mind slips into a replay. It shows you the time you stumbled over your words in school, the moment a boss once frowned at your mistake, the instant when someone you trusted did not respond with kindness. That old humiliation suddenly feels fresh again, as though no years have passed. The present fades, and the past takes over the stage. The brain has its reasons for this. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep within, acts as the emotional amplifier. When something frightens, embarrasses, or wounds you, the amygdala rings it like a bell. It is meant to keep you safe, to warn you. Remember this. Avoid it happening again. This worked well when danger meant the snap of a twig in the forest, the rustle of something that might be predator or prey. But when the danger is a mistaken conversation or a misstep in love, this same mechanism can hold you hostage. Trauma and regret become like a broken record. Imagine a needle caught in a single groove. The music is meant to move forward, to play a full song, but instead it repeats the same harsh sound again and again. That is how unresolved pain behaves in the mind. Instead of integrating into your larger story and moving quietly to the background, it sticks, replaying itself until it shapes how you meet the present. This is why people often avoid opportunities that remind them of past humiliation. The body and mind, trying to be protective, shout, "Don't go there. Remember what happened last time." The problem is that the past is not the same as now. Circumstances change, you have grown, the people are different, and yet the loop insists that history will repeat itself, so better not to try. You might notice this most vividly at night. The day winds down, the room is quiet, but your mind suddenly brings up a scene from long ago. Something you said, something you didn't say, something you wish you could erase. You lie there, heart beating faster, body tense, as if the old moment were happening again right there in the darkness. The past, though finished, has found a way to live on in your nervous system. There is even a word psychologists use for this: rumination. It comes from the image of a cow chewing cud, bringing the same food up again and again. Rumination in the mind is much the same. You bring the same painful thought up over and over, hoping to digest it into something new, but instead it remains bitter and heavy. And yet, if we look more gently, there is also meaning hidden here. The very fact that trauma and regret loop so insistently tells us something about the human mind. It wants to learn. It wants to make sense. It keeps returning to the scene not to torture you, but because it has not yet filed the memory away safely. Like a librarian with a book that doesn't quite fit any shelf, the brain keeps picking it up, turning it over, and setting it down again, waiting for the right place to put it. There is a quiet comfort in recognizing this. The looping is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that your mind is still trying to protect you, however clumsily. The amygdala rings its alarm not out of malice but out of caution. It is the brain's way of saying, "Be careful, remember what hurt." Of course, knowing this doesn't make the loop stop immediately, but it can soften the edges. Instead of fighting the memory, you might notice it with gentleness, saying to yourself, "Yes, I know why you're here. You're trying to help me." In that moment, the loop loosens just slightly. Think of it like a child tugging at your sleeve to warn you of danger. The child may not understand the full situation, may even cry out too often, but the tug comes from care. When you respond with patience rather than anger, the child calms. So too with the looping memory. It may help to bring an everyday image to mind. Imagine a jar on your desk with a fly trapped inside. The fly buzzes, hitting the glass again and again, unable to find the opening at the top. The buzzing is not because the fly is foolish, but because it cannot yet see another path. The loop of trauma and regret is much the same. The memory is trapped in its jar, buzzing endlessly. With time, with patience, with the right support, the jar can be lifted and the fly can escape. So as you lie here tonight, if a memory circles back uninvited, notice it as part of this human process. The past is echoing, yes, but it is also signaling that your mind is alive, still learning, still reshaping. You're not condemned to replay forever. The broken record can be lifted. The needle can move on. In the sessions ahead, we will look at other ways the past can take over. The lure of nostalgia, the fear of repeating mistakes, the heavy pull of age. But for now, let this be enough. You're not alone in your loops. Everyone carries a few. And like all songs, even the ones that repeat endlessly, they eventually fade into silence. If trauma and regret keep us stuck in painful loops, nostalgia keeps us wrapped in golden ones. Nostalgia has a gentler face. It arrives with a smile, a warm sigh, a sudden sweetness that can feel almost medicinal. A song from your teenage years drifts from a passing car and you find yourself back at a summer evening, windows down, laughter in the air, as though time has folded itself. It feels like stepping briefly into a photograph where everyone is younger, lighter, untouched by what came after. But nostalgia is not a perfect mirror. It is more like an artist's painting, where shadows are softened and details are conveniently skipped. We call it the good old days, forgetting that those days too had their discomforts. Childhood summers come back as endless play in the sun, not as itchy mosquito bites, sunburned shoulders, or long car rides with no air conditioning. We remember the sweetness, but the sting fades. Scientists have found that memory is biased toward emotional peaks. The highs and the lows linger, the middle tends to dissolve. A long holiday may be remembered for one thrilling adventure and one argument, with all the ordinary days in between blurred. When you look back, you don't see the whole film. You see highlights, edited into a trailer that plays again whenever you feel nostalgic. And it is not just personal memory. Entire cultures fall into nostalgia, imagining that some earlier decade was simpler, kinder, better. We speak of the 1950s as an era of innocence, forgetting that it was also an era of deep inequalities and anxieties. The mind does this on purpose. It trims complexity so the past feels more comforting than it truly was. It turns yesterday into a sanctuary when today feels uncertain. There is comfort in this. Nostalgia can ease loneliness, connect us to identity, remind us of where we came from. The smell of your grandmother's cooking, the crackle of an old vinyl record, the sight of a childhood toy, all of these are threads tying you to a story bigger than the immediate present. They remind you that you are not adrift. You are part of a long narrative, but there is also a trap. When nostalgia becomes too alluring, it tempts us to stay there. We begin to measure the present only against the good old days, and of course the present comes up short. Nothing feels as rich, as joyful, as golden as memory insists the past once was, and so today feels diminished, no matter its actual beauty. You may have noticed this when speaking with someone older who says, "Things aren't what they used to be." The statement might be true in some ways, but often it is coloured by this bias. They are not wrong to remember fondly, but the selective glow of nostalgia makes comparison unfair. It is like comparing a painting with a photograph. The painting is idealised, the photograph unflinching. The present, being real, cannot compete with the curated past. Gentle humour helps us see this. Imagine trying to relive those childhood summers in full detail. Along with the games and ice cream would come the bee stings, the sticky heat, the boredom of long afternoons when there was nothing to do. Yet when we tell the story, we skip these parts. We keep the laughter, the friendships, the fireworks. Our minds are excellent editors, but poor historians. Nostalgia can even make us underestimate our own growth. When you look back and long for the ease of being a child, you might forget how confusing it felt to be small, how much you long to grow up. The longing goes both ways, but memory smooths it out until only one direction seems desirable: back. This longing is not inherently harmful. In fact, studies show that nostalgia can increase feelings of meaning, connection, and even resilience. It is a way of reminding yourself that life has had joy, and therefore can have joy again. But if it becomes a constant refuge, nostalgia can make you reluctant to invest in today. Why plant new seeds if you're always gazing at the garden of yesterday? Think of it as carrying around a photo album. Opening it now and then can be delightful, even healing. But if you never close the album, you miss the living faces in front of you. You miss the chance to take new photos. So how do you notice when nostalgia is helping and when it is hindering? A simple question. After remembering, do you feel lighter or do you feel weighed down? If the memory makes you smile and return to the present with warmth, it has served you well. If it makes the present seem grey by comparison, perhaps it is time to set the photo album aside for a while. As you lie here, you might allow one fond memory to surface. A meal with friends, a holiday morning, a childhood game. Notice its warmth, its golden tint, and then notice what is missing. The ordinary details, the complications, the background noise, that's all right. Memory was never meant to be a perfect record. It was meant to be a story, told and retold. The danger is not that nostalgia distorts. It always will. The danger is when we forget that distortion is happening, when we let the painted version of yesterday rob today of its colour. The present has its own laughter, its own sunlight, its own richness. It may not feel like the good old days yet, but someday, today will be one of those golden memories. And so, the challenge is gentle but profound. To notice nostalgia when it lifts you, and to release it when it tempts you to stay too long. To treat it as a guest, not a landlord. A reminder, not a ruler. If nostalgia tempts us to linger in the glow of the past, fear keeps us wary of its shadows. Just as sweet memories can pull us backward, painful ones can hold us still, whispering warnings whenever we dare to move forward. This is the fear of repetition, the quiet, often unconscious belief that what once went wrong will surely go wrong again. It shows up in small ways. Perhaps you once burned your tongue on hot tea. For weeks afterward, every sip is cautious, tentative, as though your mouth still carries the sting. This makes sense. Pain is a powerful teacher, but sometimes the brain holds on to that lesson long after it is useful. Long after the tea has cooled, you still hesitate, as if the burn might return. The same principle applies to experiences far beyond tea. A failed relationship leaves you wary of opening your heart again. A public mistake makes you reluctant to speak in front of others. A rejection letter makes you hesitate to send out another application. The brain, trying to be protective, replays the memory with a warning label attached. Remember how this felt. Better not try again. Neuroscience tells us that the amygdala, our emotional amplifier, lights up more intensely for negative events than for positive ones. This is sometimes called the negativity bias. It is as though the brain prefers to overlearn from danger than to risk forgetting. In the past, this bias kept us alive. Better to avoid a berry that once made you sick than to risk it twice. But in modern life, it often means we carry fear into places where it no longer belongs. You might think of it as a guard dog that barks too loudly. Once its warning saved you, but now it growls even when the mail carrier walks by, even when a friend comes to the door. The instinct to protect becomes a barrier to connection. The fear of repetition can become so strong that it paralyzes action altogether. Psychologists sometimes call this learned helplessness. When an animal is exposed to repeated unpleasant experiences it cannot escape, it eventually stops trying, even when the door is left open. In people, this can look like giving up on goals, assuming that effort will always be wasted, because in the past it once was. But here is the paradox. While memory is biased toward remembering pain, the present is not the past. Conditions change. People change. You change. To assume that what happened before will always happen again is to forget your own capacity for growth. The memory may shout, but it does not always tell the truth. Consider learning to ride a bicycle. Almost no one learns without falling. Scraped knees, wobbly starts, sudden crashes into hedges, all of these are part of the process. If the fear of repetition held complete power, no child would ever try a second time. And yet, children do. They get back on, sometimes trembling, sometimes crying, but always moving forward. And eventually the memory of falling is replaced by the exhilaration of balance, of gliding freely. Adults, however, are less forgiving with themselves. A failed relationship at 30 can feel final, in a way a tumble at age 6 never did. A career setback feels like a permanent mark, and so the fear of repetition takes root, convincing you that to try again is only to invite the same pain. But this is an illusion born of memory's loud voice. Everyday life offers softer examples. Imagine biting into an apple that turned out sour. The next time you pick one up at the market, you hesitate, choosing carefully, maybe even putting it back. But apples are not all the same. Neither are experiences or people or days. To let one sour apple dictate all future choices is to shrink the orchard of your life down to nothing. It may help to think of this fear as a shadow. A shadow has the shape of something real, but not its substance. It stretches long in certain light, convincing you of its size, but step closer and you see it is only darkness cast on the ground. The past can cast long shadows, but they are not the events themselves. They are echoes, outlines, impressions. There is comfort in knowing that the brain is not only wired for fear, it is also wired for learning. Just as one mistake can make you cautious, one success can retrain the system. Each new attempt is an opportunity to update the script, to teach your amygdala that this time the outcome was different. The only way to disprove the fear of repetition is to live through the repetition and discover it is not the same. So, the next time you find yourself hesitating before sending the message, before stepping on the stage, before sipping the tea, you might pause and remind yourself, this is not then, this is now. I am not who I was then. I am here, changed. Even if the voice of memory whispers otherwise, you can offer yourself this gentler truth. As you rest tonight, you might let one fear come softly to mind, not to dwell on it, but to notice how it feels. Then picture it as that broken record from before, repeating the same line endlessly. Imagine lifting the needle, letting the music continue. The song of your life is larger than one refrain. The record does not have to stay stuck. As the years gather, something curious begins to happen in the mind. The past, once a faint companion walking behind you, begins to stride closer, sometimes even stepping ahead. For many people, the older they grow, the louder their memories become, until the present feels softened beneath the weight of recollection. There is science to explain this. Research from the National Institute on Aging shows that older adults tend to rely more on reminiscence than on anticipation. The balance of the pendulum shifts. Where the young often look forward, projecting themselves into the future, those in later years find themselves looking back, rewalking the corridors of what has already been. The present becomes a meeting place of memories, a hall lined with portraits, each frame containing a moment that refuses to fade. There is beauty in this. To sit with an elder and hear them recount their stories is to feel the sweep of history carried in a single voice. They become, as poets sometimes say, living libraries. The details may not always be exact. The memory of a war story may take on new colours. A childhood tale may be polished smoother than it once was. But the essence remains. Each retelling is less about factual accuracy and more about meaning, about stitching a coherent self across decades. And yet, there is also a challenge. The same weight of memory that enriches identity can sometimes overshadow the present. If yesterday feels more vivid than today, life begins to tilt. Conversations slip more easily into when I was young than into what we shall do tomorrow. The risk is that the present becomes a hallway for echoes rather than a space for fresh footsteps. You may have seen this in family gatherings. A grandmother retells the same story about her wedding day, her eyes lighting up as if it were only last week. A grandfather insists that music or manners or work ethic were better back then. To younger ears it may sound repetitive or nostalgic, but to them it is alive, immediate. The memory has become a touchstone, grounding them in identity when the present feels uncertain. Part of this is practical. As we age, some types of memory, especially short-term recall, become less reliable. You may forget where you put your keys, but remember the smell of your childhood home in perfect detail. The mind, in a sense, leans back on the sturdier beams of older memories when the scaffolding of recent ones feels fragile. This can make the past seem not only more comforting but more accessible. Imagine a shelf of books. The new ones are thin, their bindings loose, pages easily misplaced. The older ones are thick, well-thumbed, their spines cracked but solid. Which do you reach for when you want a story to hold? The sturdy volumes, of course. That is how the aging mind treats memory. The older stories are easier to grasp, and so they are told again and again. This reliance on the past can become, at times, a prison. When every conversation circles back, when every comparison favours yesterday, the present risks being dismissed as lesser. For the person living it, this can be both comforting and limiting. It is comforting because the past is familiar, rehearsed, polished into coherence. It is limiting because it leaves less room for surprise, less openness to the gifts of the moment. But perhaps we can hold this tension with gentleness. To live in memory is not only a retreat, it is also a form of legacy. When someone older shares their stories, they are passing down more than facts. They are offering continuity. They are saying, I was here, I lived. These moments mattered. In a world that often rushes forward, the act of remembering is itself a kind of resistance, a slowing down that insists life is not only about what's next, but also about what endures. Still, there is wisdom in balancing memory with presence. Some older adults find this balance through small practices: gardening, noticing birdsong, savouring meals. These anchors pull them gently into the present even as the past hums around them. In those moments, the living library is not closed off to new pages. It is still adding chapters, however quietly. For younger listeners, it can be a comfort to know that our relationship with memory will change over time. What feels now like an occasional haunting or a nostalgic tug may one day become the very fabric of our daily awareness. To know this is to prepare with compassion for ourselves and for others. So, when you next hear someone older retell a story you've already heard many times, perhaps you can listen not for the novelty but for the meaning. Notice how their voice steadies when they describe it, how the memory has become a touchstone of identity. It is not just repetition, it is a lifeline to continuity. And as you imagine your own life years from now, perhaps you can wonder, which moments will you carry most vividly? Which days will you tell again and again, polishing them into stories that outlast the years? The answer is not meant to trap you, but to remind you that memory, even in its heaviest form, is part of what makes life rich, connected and enduring. Still, we cannot live only in echoes. The present, fragile as it is, deserves its place. That is where we turn next, to the art of reclaiming, of loosening the grip of memory, of finding anchors that bring us gently back to now. By now, we've wandered through the shadows and sweetness of memory, how trauma can loop like a broken record, how nostalgia paints the past in golden hues, how fear of repetition can paralyze, and how aging sometimes makes yesterday louder than today. With so many echoes, it may feel impossible to live in the present at all, and yet there are ways to soften memory's grip, to reclaim a space that belongs to now. One of the simplest and most profound is mindfulness. Mindfulness is often described as paying attention, on purpose, to the present moment without judgment. That definition may sound clinical, but in practice it is something far more tender. It is the act of noticing, the way steam curls upward from a cup of tea, the rhythm of your breath as it flows in and out, the sensation of fabric against your skin. These are not extraordinary experiences. They are small, ordinary anchors, reminding you that right here, right now, life is happening. When you practice mindfulness, you're not erasing the past. You're not denying that memories tug at you. Instead, you are choosing gently to rest your attention on what is directly before you. The taste of warm water, the sound of a bird outside your window, the way your chest rises and falls whether you think about it or not. These simple acts become a quiet tether, pulling you back when the mind wants to drift too far into regret or anticipation. Science supports this. Studies show that mindfulness can reduce rumination, the endless chewing of old regrets. It can also calm the amygdala, the emotional amplifier that so often rings alarms from the past. In brain scans, regular mindfulness practice is linked with thicker grey matter in areas associated with attention and self-regulation. But you don't need an MRI to know its effect. You can feel it in your body when you take one slow, deliberate breath and notice it all the way through. Think of the mind like a snow globe. Most of the time it is shaken, thoughts swirling like glitter, past and future blending in a storm. Mindfulness is the act of setting the globe down. Slowly, the flakes settle. The scene inside becomes clearer. The past is still there, yes, painted on the miniature buildings and trees, but now you can see it without being lost in the flurry. You may already practice mindfulness without calling it by that name. When you knead dough and feel the texture changing beneath your palms, when you walk slowly through a park noticing the crunch of leaves beneath your shoes, when you pause at the end of a long day to simply listen to rain against the window, these are all ways of anchoring yourself in now, of reminding yourself that the present is not only a bridge between memory and anticipation, it is also a place to rest. Of course, the mind will wander. It will bring up the embarrassing moment from years ago or leap ahead to tomorrow's tasks. This is not failure. This is what the mind does. The art of mindfulness is not in stopping those thoughts, but in noticing them and then gently returning attention to something simple and real. The steam of the tea, the breath, the heartbeat, again and again, like guiding a child back to bed after they've wandered into the hall. Some traditions liken this to sitting by a river. Thoughts float past like leaves on the current, some bright, some dark, some carrying the weight of memory, some carrying the shimmer of hopes. Mindfulness does not mean damming the river or chasing the leaves. It means sitting quietly on the bank, watching them drift, knowing you are not the river itself. You are the one who sees. At night, this can be especially comforting. When memory loops threaten to replay themselves in the dark, when nostalgia or fear whispers in your ear, you can anchor yourself with something immediate. The feel of your blanket, the sound of your breath, even the weight of your body sinking gently into the bed. These are not distractions from memory. They are reminders that you exist here, in this moment, safe and whole. There is also a gentle paradox in mindfulness. By focusing on the present, you are not discarding the past, you're actually giving it a softer place to rest. Instead of wrestling with old memories, you let them settle in the background like books on a shelf. They are still part of your story, but they do not need to shout. They can wait while you sip your tea, listen to the rain, or simply breathe. Mindfulness is not dramatic. It rarely feels like revelation. But in its quiet way, it reshapes your relationship with time. It reminds you that you're not trapped in yesterday, nor entirely lost in tomorrow. You have a place to stand, even if it lasts only for the length of a breath. And in that breath, you may find something you thought was lost: peace. So, perhaps tonight, as you listen, you might take one slow, deliberate breath, following it from beginning to end. Feel the air enter, cool and fresh. Feel it leave, warm and softened. Nothing else is required. That simple act is enough. It is an anchor, a gentle reminder that you are here, in the now, even as memory waits its turn. By now, you know that memory is not a photograph, neatly stored in an album, ready to be pulled out unchanged. It is more like a painting, and each time you return to it, the brush touches the canvas again, sometimes brightening a colour, sometimes smudging a line, sometimes adding details that weren't there before. This means that memory is alive, fluid, and open to interpretation, and that, in turn, means you have a certain power, the ability to reframe the past. Reframing doesn't mean rewriting history or pretending things were different than they were. It means choosing the perspective from which you view them. Think of two people looking at the same landscape. One sees only the storm clouds, the other notices the rainbow breaking through. Both are looking at the same sky, but their eyes settle on different details. Reframing is the art of deciding which details to emphasize in the memories you carry forward. Consider an embarrassing moment from long ago. Perhaps you tripped on stage, or your voice cracked in the middle of a presentation, and the memory still makes you wince. At first, the scene was painted in harsh colours, red with shame, dark with humiliation. But as years pass, you may find yourself retelling the story to friends, even laughing about it. With each retelling, the brushstrokes shift. What was once only embarrassment becomes humour. The sting is softened by perspective. This is reframing in action. The memory did not vanish. It was reshaped, given a new meaning. Instead of being a mark of failure, it became proof of resilience, or a funny anecdote to bond over. The past is the same. The story you tell about it is different. Science supports this fluidity. Neuroscientists call it reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, it becomes temporarily malleable, like clay taken out of the kiln. In that window, emotions and context can alter it before it is stored again. This is why therapy often involves revisiting painful events, because in the act of recalling, there is a chance to reshape, to soften the sharp edges, to paint new colours, to tell a kinder story. You might already practice reframing without naming it. When you look back at a breakup, for example, you may first remember only the heartbreak, but later you may see it as the event that opened space for growth, or that eventually led you to someone better suited to your life. The facts remain unchanged, but the meaning evolves. Think of reframing as editing the narrator's voice in the story of your life. At first, the narrator might be critical, harsh, focused only on mistakes. But over time, you can invite in a new voice, one that is gentler, more forgiving, more able to see the lesson rather than only the wound. The story is still yours, but the tone shifts, and with it the weight you carry. Everyday examples abound. A child might once have been scolded for being too curious and carried the shame of that label. But reframed in adulthood, the same trait becomes inquisitive, the very quality that fuels creativity and discovery. What was once seen as a flaw can, through reframing, become a strength. It may help to think of a prism. Hold it up to the light one way and the glass looks clear. Tilt it slightly and suddenly a rainbow appears. The light is the same. The shift is in the angle of view. So it is with memory. The past cannot be changed, but how you view it can refract into new colours. Reframing does not deny pain. A loss remains a loss, a wound remains a wound, but it allows you to carry that pain in a way that also acknowledges resilience. Instead of saying, "I was broken," you may come to say, "I survived and I grew." The facts are the same, the story has expanded, and this too is a form of reclaiming the present. When you reframe the past, you loosen its grip on today. The memory no longer intrudes with the same sting. Instead, it offers perspective, sometimes even gratitude. The same moment that once felt like an anchor pulling you down can, reframed, become a stepping stone on which you stand taller. You might try this now, in a gentle way. Call to mind a small mistake from your past, not a traumatic one, just something that still makes you shake your head. Notice how you feel when you picture it. Then ask, what else is true about that moment? Did it teach you something? Did it make you more compassionate? Did it give you a story you can now share with humour? Even a tiny shift in perspective can loosen the loop, easing its hold. Reframing is not always easy. Some memories are too raw, too complex to be softened quickly. That is all right. Reframing is not about forcing positivity. It is about allowing the possibility of new meaning over time. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to let the memory sit quietly until you're ready to paint it again. But the possibility is always there. Each time you recall the past, you hold a brush in your hand, whether you realize it or not. You can choose harsh strokes or gentle ones, dark tones or bright ones. The canvas is not fixed, and so, as you rest tonight, Perhaps you can imagine your memories not as rigid photographs, but as paintings hanging in a gallery. Some are finished, some are still being worked on. As you walk through the gallery, you're both the visitor and the artist. You can stop, step closer, and add a brushstroke, a softening, a highlight. And in doing so, you reshape not only the past, but the way you inhabit the present. For most of us, forgetting feels like failure. We apologise for misplaced names, grow frustrated when keys go missing, or feel embarrassed when a detail slips away during conversation. We often imagine the ideal mind as a perfect archive, storing every fact and memory neatly, ready for retrieval at any moment. But in truth, forgetting is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. It is a gift, a quiet grace that allows life to move forward without being crushed beneath the weight of every detail. Think of your desk. If every piece of paper, every scrap of note, every list and scribble were kept on its surface, soon there would be no space left to work. Forgetting is like tidying that desk. It clears the clutter, keeps only what matters most, and makes room for new ideas to unfold. Without forgetting, the mind would drown in detail. You would remember every phone number you ever dialed, every stranger's face you passed on the street, every sentence you read in every book. And while that may sound impressive, it would be unbearable. To live with perfect memory is not to live freely, but to live overwhelmed. Neurologists tell us that forgetting is an active process. It is not simply the absence of recall, but the presence of pruning. The brain, constantly reorganizing itself, trims synaptic connections the way a gardener trims a hedge, removing excess growth so that what remains can thrive. This pruning allows the important pathways to strengthen while the rest fade gently into the background. We sometimes encounter people with conditions of extraordinary memory, individuals who can recall almost every day of their lives in vivid detail. At first, it seems like a superpower, but many of them describe it as a burden. They cannot escape the sting of old pains, cannot soften the sharpness of past embarrassments. Every failure replays as though it happened only yesterday. Forgetting, for the rest of us, is the blessing that softens these edges, blurs the harsh outlines, lets wounds scar over instead of remaining raw. You may have felt this gift yourself without realizing. A heartbreak once unbearable eventually eases, not because the event was erased, but because the details faded enough for other colours of life to wash in. A humiliation that once made you wince loses its power over time, becoming just one small mark in a much larger picture. This is forgetting at work, not erasure, but perspective. Consider how children learn. They do not remember every stumble, every mispronounced word, every mistake in detail. If they did, they might never dare to walk, speak, or try again. Forgetting allows the failed attempts to fade, leaving behind only the lessons. What remains is not paralysis, but progress. There is a gentle metaphor here, the mind as a chalkboard. Each day brings new marks, words, numbers, doodles of experience. Without erasing, the board would soon be unreadable. Forgetting is the soft cloth that wipes away just enough so that the next lesson has space to be written. The faint traces may linger, like ghostly lines beneath fresh chalk, but they no longer dominate the surface. This forgetting is not random. It is shaped by meaning, emotion, and repetition. What is used often, or carries strong feeling, tends to stay. What is ordinary, repetitive, or unimportant slips quietly away. This is why you remember the day you graduated, but not the hundreds of breakfasts you ate in the same kitchen. The brain, ever efficient, decides that one is part of your identity, while the others are details best released. And so forgetting is not a betrayal of the past. It is a way of protecting the present. It frees your attention from drowning in trivia, allows your heart to loosen its grip on old pain, and keeps you light enough to step forward. To remember everything is to live in shadow. To forget just enough is to let the light in. There is even a spiritual tenderness to forgetting. Imagine the mind as a house. If every guest who ever visited stayed permanently, filling every chair, every hallway, there would be no space left for anyone new. Forgetting opens the door. It gently escorts old guests out so that new ones may enter. In this way, forgetting is not absence but hospitality. Of course, forgetting can sometimes bring sadness too. The fading of details about someone we love, the softening of their voice in memory can feel like a loss. Yet even here, forgetting gives us something in return. It allows the sharp ache of grief to mellow so that remembering them becomes less about pain and more about presence. What lingers is not every detail but the essence, the way they made us feel, the light they left behind. So perhaps forgetting is best seen not as failure, but as forgiveness. The mind forgives itself by letting go of what no longer needs to be carried. It forgives the burden of too many details, forgives the sting of mistakes, forgives the heaviness of sorrow. It leaves room for new laughter, new learning, new love. Tonight, as you settle deeper into rest, you might picture your mind as that desk gently cleared. The papers stacked neatly, the clutter swept away, only the most meaningful pages left before you. Or perhaps picture the chalkboard, soft cloth passing over it, leaving a clean space for tomorrow's lessons. This is the quiet work your brain does even as you sleep. Forgetting is not a gap, but a grace. A space cleared, a path opened, a kindness given. And in that space, the present can bloom. Each night, as you drift into sleep, something remarkable happens inside your brain. The world outside grows quiet, your body sinks into rest, and meanwhile, the mind begins its own hidden work. Dreams flicker, memories shuffle, and behind the curtain of consciousness, a kind of housekeeping takes place. The brain, ever the quiet custodian, begins deciding which pieces of the day to keep, which to discard, and which to blend into the story of your life. Think of it like a party that has just ended. The guests have gone home, but the room is full of confetti, half-empty glasses and plates stacked in corners. Sleep is when the cleaning crew arrives. Some items are swept away. The random chatter, the fleeting images, the unimportant details. Others are carefully gathered, polished and stored, ready to be remembered tomorrow. This nightly ritual is what scientists call memory consolidation. Without it, the experiences of the day would remain scattered like confetti on the floor. Different stages of sleep play different roles. During deep sleep, the brain strengthens factual memories, the names, dates, skills, and information you may have tried to learn. During REM sleep, when dreams are most vivid, the brain weaves emotional experiences into the larger tapestry of your identity. It is as though the librarian of your mind works late at night, filing, discarding, and sometimes even rewriting the books on your shelves. You may have noticed how a good night's sleep changes your perspective. A problem that seemed overwhelming yesterday feels lighter in the morning. A conversation that echoed with tension loses some of its sting. This is no coincidence. Sleep has done its work, softening what needed softening, strengthening what needed keeping, and leaving you freer to meet the new day. Dreams themselves may seem strange, even nonsensical, but they are part of this process too. They are rehearsals, fragments of memory and imagination stitched together into theatre. You may dream of a classroom blended with a forest, or a loved one appearing in a city they never visited. These odd combinations are the brain's way of testing, sorting, exploring. By mixing and replaying, it finds meaning in the noise. Sometimes, dreams carry residues into waking life. You may wake unsettled, your mood shadowed by something you can't quite recall. Or you may wake with a lightness, as though you have already laughed before the day began. This too is memory's housekeeping. The mind is carrying traces of its nightly work into the present moment. Consider how forgetting and remembering dance together in sleep. Without forgetting, You would be burdened with every trivial detail of the day. Without remembering, you would lose the threads that give your life coherence. Sleep balances the two, erasing just enough, reinforcing just enough, so that you wake with both lightness and continuity. There is something deeply forgiving about this. While you rest, the mind gives you another chance. It lets go of clutter, stitches meaning into fragments, and restores perspective. Even your hardest days are softened a little by this nightly grace. Think of it like a garden. Each night the gardener walks the paths, pruning here, watering there, removing weeds, and leaving space for new growth. You do not see the gardener at work, but in the morning, the garden feels refreshed. The soil is ready, the flowers stand taller. This is what sleep does for memory and for self. Of course, when sleep is disrupted, the clutter remains. Without enough rest, memories may stay jumbled, emotions may feel raw, and the present may be crowded with yesterday's debris. This is why long nights of insomnia often make the past feel heavier, looping more insistently. The librarian has not had time to do her work. The confetti lies unswept. But when sleep is deep and sufficient, you wake not only rested but lighter. It's as though the brain has turned the page for you, even when you were too tired to do it yourself. You rise into a new day with space made for the present, room cleared for new experiences. So perhaps tonight, as you listen here, you can take comfort in knowing that even as you drift into dreams, your mind is at work, gently tidying. The confetti will be swept, the shelves will be organised, the garden pruned. You need not control this process. It happens on its own, part of the gift of being human. And tomorrow, when you wake, the past will be just a little lighter, the present a little clearer. You will carry forward what matters, and the rest will fade, like footprints softened by the tide. There is an old saying that the best way out of the past is not to stare at it, not to wrestle with it, but to walk gently into something new. Action, even the smallest kind, can be an antidote to memory's grip. It doesn't erase the past or deny its lessons, but it loosens the hold of regret and hesitation by placing your body, your hands, your thoughts firmly into the stream of now. Think of writing a grocery list. At first glance, it seems trivial, hardly worth noticing. Yet in that act, choosing apples or bread, remembering the milk, jotting down the coffee you'll need for the week, you are already reaching forward. The list is a blueprint of tomorrow's meals, a quiet declaration that life continues. Whatever the past held, here you are, making space for nourishment in the days to come. Or picture yourself planting a seed. The soil is cool, the seed is small, almost invisible in your palm. You press it into the earth, cover it, water it, and walk away. Nothing changes instantly. The garden looks the same, and yet, the moment you planted, you moved forward. You gave yourself a reason to return tomorrow, to check, to care. The seed is not just a future plant, it is a present act of hope. Psychologists call this momentum. Each small action builds on the next, and soon movement itself becomes easier. Imagine trying to push a heavy cart. At first, it hardly budges. But once it begins to roll, each step feels lighter. In the same way, one step into the future, however modest, makes the next one easier. You don't have to leap out of the past all at once. You only have to begin. Action is powerful because it takes place in the present. Memories live in the mind, but action lives in the body. You cannot plant a seed yesterday. You cannot write tomorrow's grocery list last week. You can only do it here in this moment with your pen, your hand, your soil. And in that simple fact lies its antidote. The body anchors you to the now even when the mind wants to drift backward. Think of the times when you felt stuck, replaying the same regret or the same fear. Then recall how even a small gesture, opening a window, making a cup of tea, sending one kind message, shifted the weight. It wasn't that the past disappeared, it was that the present grew stronger, inviting you to inhabit it more fully. Action also reminds us that we are not static. The past may feel heavy, as though carved in stone, but every new act proves otherwise. Each decision, each step, however small, reshapes the path. If the past is the ground behind you, action is the footfall pressing into the earth now, leaving a new print, pointing a new direction. Consider cooking. The recipe may come from memory, your mother's soup, a dish from your travels, but the act of chopping, stirring, tasting is undeniably present. With each motion, you're transforming raw ingredients into something nourishing. This is how action works on the psyche too. It transforms the raw material of memory into sustenance for today. There is comfort in knowing that action need not be grand. You do not need to write a book, run a marathon, or start a revolution to move out of yesterday's grip. You only need to take one step. Wash the dish, open the notebook, lace the shoes. Small actions repeated become the threads that weave a new chapter. Even nature reminds us of this. A river does not leap valleys in a single bound. It moves stone by stone, ripple by ripple, carving canyons over centuries. Action is like this, gentle persistence, each movement shaping the terrain of your life, often without fanfare, often without notice, until one day the landscape looks entirely different. It may help to think of action as a kind of compass. The past is always pulling, nostalgia tugging one way, regret tugging another. But when you take a step, any step, you align yourself with direction. The compass doesn't show the whole map, only the next bearing. But that is enough. The act of moving forward keeps you from circling endlessly in the same loop. So perhaps tonight, as you rest, you can imagine one small action you might take tomorrow. Not a monumental change, but something gentle. Writing a note, watering a plant, walking to the end of your street. Let the thought of it settle in you as a seed, not as a demand, not as a burden, but as a quiet invitation. The past is here, yes, but so is the next step. Action is not the denial of memory. It is memory's companion, its balance. While the past tells you what was, action reminds you of what still can be. And in that reminder, the weight of yesterday softens, leaving space for today's breath, today's movement, today's life. When you think about the future, it is easy to imagine it as something distant, a far horizon, a vague destination you might someday reach. But in truth, the future begins much closer. It begins in the very next moment. Every present instant, as fleeting as it feels, is a brick in tomorrow's house. And with each choice, each gesture, you decide how that house is built. This can sound daunting, as if every moment carries immense responsibility. But, seen gently, it is not a burden. It is an invitation. You do not need to construct the whole house at once. You only need to place the next brick, knit the next loop, write the next line. The rest will follow, stitch by stitch, stone by stone. Think of knitting a scarf. At first, the yarn looks like nothing more than loose strands, tangled and formless. But with each loop, each patient motion of the hands, something begins to take shape. No single stitch makes the scarf, but without each stitch, the scarf could not exist. The same is true of life. The past has woven its patterns already, but the next loop is always yours to choose. This is why the word next holds such quiet power. The past may be heavy, but next opens a window. A mistake can be followed by a next attempt. A silence can be followed by a next word. A failure can be followed by a next step. Life is not a single stroke, but a sequence, and at every point in that sequence, the chance for renewal exists. Think of a child learning to speak. They stumble over sounds, mispronounce words, tangle syllables. Each error could be final, each frustration enough to stop. But what keeps them moving forward is the rhythm of next try, next word, next conversation. Eventually the stumbles fade into fluency. Without next, there would only be silence. Or consider the act of baking bread. The dough does not become a loaf instantly. It rises slowly, step by step, each rise building on the last. The baker cannot demand the finished loaf before its time, but they can take the next action, kneading, waiting, baking. And in those small nexts, the bread takes form. You may notice this in your own life when you look back. What once felt monumental, the decision to move cities, to change careers, to end or begin a relationship, was not made in one leap. It was made through a series of nexts, a conversation here, a choice there, a morning when you simply decided to take the next step. At the time, it may have felt uncertain. Only in hindsight do you see how each next became the path itself. There is a comfort in knowing that next does not have to be dramatic. If the past feels heavy, you do not need to leap into a dazzling transformation. You only need to choose one steady step. That might mean writing one sentence, walking one block, making one phone call. These are small things, almost invisible on their own. Yet over time, they accumulate into something vast. Think of how rivers carve valleys. No single ripple cuts through rock, but each ripple, each flow, adds to the next until mountains are shaped and landscapes transformed. The present moment is like that ripple. It may seem small, but it carries the weight of next, and with enough time it can reshape the terrain of your life. You might try reflecting on this now. Think of one place where the past feels heavy, an old regret, a lingering hesitation. Then ask yourself not what you must do to fix it all, but what comes next. Perhaps it is as simple as breathing deeply. Perhaps it is writing one line in a journal. Perhaps it's placing one flower in a vase. The power is not in completing the whole story tonight. It is in turning the page. The word next can be reassuring even in moments of pain. Grief, heartbreak, disappointment, all of these feel endless when you're in them. But there is always a next dawn, a next breath, a next chance. It does not erase what was lost, but it opens the possibility of what can still be found. Life is not about undoing the past. The past will always remain, woven into the fabric of who you are. But by choosing the next stitch, you keep weaving. By placing the next brick, you keep building. By whispering the next word, you keep speaking. The house of tomorrow will rise from these simple, steady motions. And perhaps, as you settle tonight, you can let that word echo softly in your mind. Next. Not as a demand, not as pressure, but as a promise. Whatever the past holds, there is always a next moment waiting. It belongs to you. The human mind has a peculiar talent. It not only replays the past, as we've seen, but also projects itself into futures that do not yet exist. The same circuits that allow you to recall your first day of school are also at work when you picture what you might have for breakfast tomorrow. Neuroscientists call this ability mental time travel. It means that even while your body sits still in the present, your mind can wander backward into memory or forward into possibility, weaving both directions into the same tapestry. Think of how often you do this without noticing. Planning a trip, you imagine the train pulling into a station you've never visited, the hotel room waiting with unfamiliar sheets, the taste of food you haven't yet tried. None of it has happened, and yet your brain conjures it with surprising vividness, borrowing textures from memory to create something new. The imagined cobblestones may be borrowed from a street you once walked. The taste of the meal may echo something your grandmother cooked. The hotel room may be a rearranged version of one you stayed in years ago. The future is painted with the colours of the past. This overlap is what makes anticipation feel so real. Picture yourself standing in an airport, boarding pass in hand. The trip has not begun, and yet you are already living parts of it in your mind. The conversations you'll have, the sights you'll see, the freedom of stepping into a new place. Your heart may even quicken. your body preparing as though it were already happening. The brain does not draw a sharp line between memory and imagination. To it, both are rehearsals, both are experiences of time. There is poetry in this. The mind as a time traveller moving back and forth across the arc of a life, carrying souvenirs from one side to build dreams on the other. It is why stories matter, why goals matter, why daydreams carry weight. In imagining forward, you're not simply escaping the present. You're rehearsing, preparing, setting the stage for what may come. Consider a child imagining what it will be like to ride a bicycle without training wheels. They have never done it, yet they can feel the wobble, the balance, the rush of speed. That rehearsal is part of what makes the eventual success possible. The brain has walked the path already, in shadow, before the feet walk it in light. You may notice the same when rehearsing a conversation. Before speaking with someone important, you play through the words in your head, imagining their responses, adjusting your tone. It may not unfold exactly as you pictured, but the rehearsal helps you step in with greater confidence. The future, rehearsed in imagination, leaves footprints in the present. Sometimes, though, this same gift becomes a burden. Just as memories of pain can loop endlessly, imagined futures of failure can paralyze. The brain's ability to anticipate is useful, but it can also flood you with worries. What if I stumble? What if I am rejected? What if it all goes wrong? In those moments, mental time travel can feel less like exploration and more like exile. The mind races ahead, dragging the body into anxieties that have not yet come to pass, but the gift remains. The same imagination that conjures fears can conjure hopes. The same rehearsal that prepares for disaster can prepare for joy. You have felt this if you've ever planned a celebration, a wedding, a birthday, a reunion. The event itself may last only hours, but the anticipation, the imagining forward, stretches the joy across weeks or months. In this way, the future becomes a reservoir of light, accessible before it even arrives. There is also comfort in knowing that the future you imagine does not have to be exact to be valuable. A trip may unfold differently, a conversation may take unexpected turns, a plan may twist in ways you never foresaw. Yet the act of imagining forward still shapes you. It sets your attention outward. It gives you reason to move. It lays bricks for the house you're building. The details may change, but the momentum remains. So, as you rest here, you might let yourself picture something simple about tomorrow. Not the entire day, just one gentle scene. A morning light on your kitchen table, the taste of tea, the sound of a bird outside. In imagining it, you're already rehearsing the grace of the next day. You're already leaning into the possibility of peace. The past may shape the palette, but the brush is in your hand now. With each imagined stroke, you paint a piece of the future. You do not need to control the whole canvas. You only need to keep painting to let the colours of memory mingle with the hues of hope. That is the gift of mental time travel. It reminds you that the future is not a blank wall waiting to be feared, but a tapestry waiting to be woven. And in that weaving, you are not only remembering who you have been, but rehearsing who you might become. We often talk about ourselves as though we are fixed, as if identity were carved once in stone and left unchanged. I am this kind of person, we say, or that is just who I am. But the truth is softer, more fluid. You're not a statue, you are a river. Each day water flows through you that was not there before. Each day the bank shifts slightly. The river is continuous, yes, but never the same twice. Science gives us a name for this: neuroplasticity. It is the brain's quiet capacity to reshape itself, to form new connections, to prune old ones, to adapt. For a long time, people thought the brain was fixed after childhood, set like concrete. But we now know it is more like a garden, growing, pruning, changing across a lifetime. Even into old age, new pathways can be formed, new habits grown, new memories planted. Think of learning to play an instrument as an adult. At first, your fingers fumble, clumsy on the keys or strings. But with each repetition, the brain rewires itself. Neurons fire together more efficiently, muscles remember, patterns take root. Before long, what felt impossible becomes natural. This is the evolving self at work, not only learning a skill but reshaping who you are through practice. Or picture recovering from a loss. At first, it feels impossible to imagine life continuing. The grief floods every corner and the past feels heavier than the present. Yet slowly the self adapts. You find new routines, new joys, new ways of carrying the memory without being crushed by it. The pain does not vanish, but your identity expands to include it. You are not the same as before, you are changed. That change is the river flowing, the garden shifting, the self evolving. It can be comforting to realize that identity is not a prison. You're not locked forever into mistakes made years ago or into labels given by others. What you were is not all you will ever be. The very biology of your brain insists on change. Each thought, each action, each experience reshapes the network of who you are. Imagine a tree through the seasons. In spring, fresh leaves unfurl. In summer, the canopy thickens. In autumn, colours blaze and fall. In winter, the branches stand bare but strong. The tree is the same, and yet never the same. Identity works like this. You are always you, and yet the details, the expressions, the outward form are always shifting. This perspective also brings gentleness to the past. If you are always evolving, then the person you once were is not exactly the person you are now. The choices made then were made by someone different, someone younger, someone with different knowledge, different fears, different strengths. You carry them with you, yes, but you're not frozen in their shape. You are allowed to grow beyond them. Consider how language evolves. Words that once meant one thing take on new meanings. Grammar shifts, accents change. The language remains recognizable but alive. So too with the self. You're a language spoken across time, shaped by history but open to new expressions. This evolving nature can be seen even in small daily acts. Each time you choose kindness when you might have chosen silence, you tilt the river slightly. Each time you learn a new skill, you plant a new seed in the garden. Each time you forgive yourself, you prune away a thorn that once snagged your steps. Over time, these small shifts accumulate into something vast, even if you do not notice them moment by moment. It may help to reflect on this when you feel stuck. The feeling of being trapped in who you are is an illusion. You may not see the river flowing, but it is moving. You may not notice the garden growing, but roots are reaching, branches spreading. The self is never still. So, rather than thinking of yourself as a single, unchanging identity, you might picture yourself as a story still being written. The past chapters are important. They shape the arc, set the stage, but they do not dictate the ending. With each word, each line, you revise the tale. The narrator is you, but the voice is evolving. There is empowerment here. You're not condemned to live in the past self who faltered, who stumbled, who feared. You're also the self who learns, who adapts, who grows. The river carries mistakes away even as it brings fresh water. The garden allows old leaves to fall even as new buds appear. As you rest tonight, you might imagine your own life as a river under starlight. The surface glimmers, the current flows, and though the water has passed, more is always arriving. You are not who you were yesterday, and tomorrow you will not be who you are tonight. That is not loss. It is life itself. The evolving self is not a weakness. It is your greatest strength. We have wandered a long way together tonight. We began with the ghosts of experiences past, those sudden echoes that return uninvited, shaping the way we feel in the present. We lingered in the illusion of the now, discovering how fragile it is, how it always slips into memory even as we try to hold it. We walk through the prisons of trauma, nostalgia, and fear, and we touch the weight of aging when the past sometimes grows louder than today. We found ways to reclaim the present through mindfulness, reframing, forgetting, and sleep's nightly housekeeping. And then we turn toward tomorrow, stepping gently into the power of action, the promise of next, the gift of imagining forward, and the river of the evolving self. Now, here, we pause. This is the place for reflection, not hurried, not heavy, but soft. Like watching the glow of sunset after a long day, noticing how the light changes slowly, steadily, until the world is bathed in twilight. Reflection at the end of a journey is not about rushing to conclusions. It is about letting the pieces settle, like flour, drifting to the bottom of a bowl after being stirred. One way to reflect is with gratitude. Gratitude not only for the joys, but also for the difficulties. Even the painful memories, even the regrets, even the wounds have shaped resilience. They have made you who you are. Bread does not rise without yeast, and the spirit does not grow without struggle. Each part of the past, whether sweet or bitter, has become an ingredient in the loaf of your life. Think of bread rising on a quiet counter. It is slow, invisible at first, and yet every bubble of air, every stretch of dough is a sign of transformation. The past, with all its weight, has done the same for you. It has stretched you, shaped you, prepared you for the present moment. Reflection is simply noticing that fact with gentleness. Reflection also asks us to see impermanence as a gift. The sunset reminds us that nothing lasts, but that is precisely why it is beautiful. If it stretched on forever, we would stop noticing. Because it fades, it glows all the brighter. In the same way, the fleeting nature of life's moments makes them precious. A child's laughter, a friend's touch, the aroma of soup simmering on the stove. None of these last forever, and that is what gives them their quiet power. It can be helpful to recall small examples. A walk taken years ago where the air smelled of pine. A moment at the seaside, the horizon vast, the sound of waves steady. A night when you stayed up talking with someone you loved, the clock forgotten, only voices filling the air. These moments passed, they could not be held, and yet they remain, not to be relived, but to be treasured. Reflection brings them gently forward, not as traps but as lanterns, soft lights that illuminate the road you have walked. There is no need to judge the past, no need to measure whether it was too heavy or too light. The fact that you are here, listening, breathing, is proof that you carried it. Proof that you moved, even if slowly, even if with pauses through everything that came before. Reflection lets you rest in that truth. Tonight as you lie here, perhaps you can picture your life as a woven cloth. Each thread a day, each colour a mood, each knot a challenge overcome. Some sections are rough, some smooth, some bright, some muted. And yet together they form something whole. You may not see the full pattern yet. You're too close to it, standing inside the loom. But one day, stepping back, you will see the design. Complex, imperfect, but unmistakably yours. Reflection is not about rewriting that design. It is about pausing to touch the fabric, to notice its texture beneath your fingers, to recognize that it is still being woven. The threads of the past are there, yes, but so too are the threads of today and the threads of tomorrow waiting to be added. And so we sit quietly in this place between yesterday and tomorrow, between memory and imagination, between who you were and who you are still becoming. This in-between space is precious. It is not demanding. It is not hurried. It simply asks you to notice, to breathe, to be. Like the sun lowering over the horizon or bread rising patiently in its bowl, reflection does not push. It simply unfolds. And in that unfolding, there is peace. The night has grown quiet. The stories of memory, of past and future, of fears and hopes have all been spoken softly into the air. And now what remains is not analysis, not explanation, but presence. A lullaby of now. There is a rhythm to your body that has been here all along, steady and faithful, even as your mind wandered across years and decades. Your breath rising and falling, your heartbeat pulsing gently like a distant drum keeping time. These rhythms are anchors to the present, reminders that you do not have to reach for the past or stretch toward the future. You're here, you're safe, you're resting. If your mind drifts, that is no mistake. Drifting is part of resting. Thoughts may float by, old conversations, tomorrow's errands, fragments of dreams forming even before sleep comes, but you do not need to hold them. Let them pass like clouds across a night sky. Behind them, the sky remains vast, open, untroubled. You might take a moment now to notice something simple. The texture of the fabric beneath your hand, the gentle weight of the blanket across your body, the faint sounds in the distance, perhaps a car moving quietly outside, or the hum of a fan, or nothing at all but stillness. These details are not distractions, they are invitations. Each one says, this is the present, this is now. There is a soft paradox here. You've travelled tonight through layers of time, explored how memory shapes you, how anticipation pulls you forward, how forgetting and reframing and dreaming all weave into who you are. And yet, at the end, what you are left with is simplicity, a breath, a heartbeat, a quiet room, the now stripped of decoration, holding you like a cradle. Sometimes when people speak of mindfulness or presence, they imagine it as a rigid discipline, sitting perfectly still, emptying the mind of all thought. But presence is gentler than that. It is not about silencing everything. It is about letting the world be as it is, and yourself be as you are, without needing to change. Even wandering thoughts are part of the lullaby. They are notes in the music, not interruptions. Imagine yourself floating in a small boat on a calm lake at night. The water is still, the stars reflected in its surface. You're not rowing, not steering, not working. You're simply resting on the water, drifting wherever it wishes to carry you. That is what the present can feel like when you let go of effort. A gentle rocking, a soft embrace, or picture yourself lying in a meadow at dusk. Fireflies begin to glow, faint at first, then more, until the air is dotted with light. You do not chase them. You only watch, feeling the grass beneath you, the air cool against your skin. Time slows here, not because the clock has stopped, but because you're no longer chasing it. You're simply noticing. This is a lullaby of now. Even your breath can become a song. Inhale, and the body receives. Exhale, and the body releases. Back and forth, again and again, a rhythm older than memory. You do not need to control it. It happens on its own. To rest with it is to be sung to, gently, by your own body. And if sleep comes, let it. If it doesn't, that is all right too. Rest is not only in sleeping, it is also in allowing yourself to soften, to set down the weight of striving. Even lying awake, you are resting when you let the present hold you, when you let the lullaby play in its quiet, steady notes. The past is spoken, the future will arrive, but here tonight, you need not carry either. You're allowed to be simply human, breathing, resting, drifting. The now is enough. The now is always enough. And so we have come to the quiet end of this wandering. Together we have strolled through memory's winding halls, where echoes of the past linger like soft voices in another room. We've seen how the present is not a sharp point but a flowing braid, stitched from what has just happened and what is about to come. We have walked through prisons built by regret, nostalgia and fear, and we have found doors, mindfulness, reframing, forgetting, and small acts of action that lead us back into the open air. We have looked toward the future, not as a distant horizon, but as a series of gentle nexts, each stitch and brick slowly shaping who we are becoming. And finally we arrived here in stillness, where presence itself sings like a lullaby. Now, all that remains is to close the book for tonight. The pages we have read together will not disappear. They will rest quietly inside you, folded among the countless chapters of your own story. Some of them may resurface tomorrow as faint recollections. Others may fade like dreams at dawn, leaving only a feeling, a trace of peace. Both are enough. You might imagine your mind as a library at night. The lamps are dimmed, the shelves stand tall, and every book, every memory, every thought is tucked safely into place. There is no need to keep reading now. The stories are safe. You can set them aside, knowing they will be there when you wish to open them again, or picture yourself closing the cover of a journal. The ink has dried, the pages filled with reflections of past and present. You set it gently on the table, not discarded but completed for the day. The act of closing the cover is not an ending but a pause, a way of saying enough for now. The truth is, you have lived in past, present and future tonight. You have remembered, imagined, reflected and dreamed, and yet beneath all of it, you are still here, breathing, held in the simplicity of this moment. That is the quiet gift, to know that while time flows, there is always a place where you can rest, a safe harbour where nothing more is required of you. So let this be your gentle farewell for the evening. The questions need no answers now. The memories need no judgments. The future needs no plans. All of it can wait. What you hold in this moment is enough. The rhythm of your breath, the steadiness of your heart, the quiet hum of being alive. And if your eyes grow heavy, let them close. If they stay open, let them soften. If sleep comes quickly, welcome it like an old friend. If it lingers, let the stillness be its own comfort. There is no right way to rest, no wrong way to listen. There is only this, you, here, safe and gently at peace. Thank you for being part of this little journey. Thank you for allowing these words to accompany you through the night. If you'd like, when you wake, you can share in the comments where, in the world you are listening from, and what time it was for you when you began. It is always a joy to see the many corners of the globe gathered together in this shared space, each of us resting beneath the same stars. For now, though, let the book close, let the story rest. The night is here to hold you, and you are allowed to drift, to soften, to sleep. Good night.